So after last week at Spa, where the final glimmer of hope for Ferrari fans was crushed and completely destroyed, it was time to head a little north to Zandvoort in the land of Max Verstappen, also known as this year's Dutch Grand Prix. A race so orange you'd think it had been sat in the world's largest tanning bed. Coming into the race, Max Verstappen had a 93-point lead in the championship, sitting comfortably ahead of title rival Leclerc. I know technically Perez sits in second place, 5 points ahead of Leclerc, but we're talking about drivers that are actually allowed to win the World Championship here. Just behind the top three teams, and Alpine was settling nicely into fourth place, growing their lead over McLaren to a nice 20 points. It's just a shame that being best of the rest doesn't actually make drivers want to stay at your team. Hey guys, it's Taron and welcome to the On Track channel and to round 15 in Max Verstappen's kingdom. Before we get going, I just want to give you guys a gentle reminder that if you do enjoy, to give the video a thumbs up and to get yourself subscribed for more weekly F1 content. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into my honest review of Formula 1 and the 2022 Dutch Grand Prix. So to start with, we had the rumour that Red Bull Racing had a new lightweight chassis in development that could be brought in at Singapore, with Ferrari boss Mattia Binotto saying how he didn't think any team could bring such an upgrade and still comply with the budget cap. Sounds to me like someone needs to find a reason for his team not challenging for the title besides their own incompetence. Staying with the theme of Ferrari, and it seemed like their love of throwing points away has transferred to drivers too, as it became clear that come the end of 2022, Mick Schumacher would no longer be part of the Ferrari Driver Academy, which personally I think is kind of unfair. I mean, he's only had major crashes while completely on his own, like once, twice, three, okay, maybe 4 times, but it's not like Haas and Ferrari have anyone else lined up to replace him. Well, apparently they do, as Italian Jesus Antonio Giovinazzi has been tipped to join for 2023, and has an FP1 outing all lined up for Cota, so sorry Mick, it's not looking too great for you. Talking of other drivers losing their seats, and we're on to the prime candidate Nicholas Latifi, someone that after 3 years of supposedly trying, is doing as well at being a racing driver as Christian Horner is at being a likeable person. But it was looking like this season could be his last, until Jos Capito said that the Canadian still has a chance to keep his seat, and this is despite Williams having said that they no longer need to rely on pay drivers to keep the team running.
So that was a f***ing lie.
And finally, on the Zandvoort track, we had a special Red Bull team promotional thing. I say thing as I can't quite think of a way to describe F1 drivers driving cars in reverse around the Zandvoort track, with one of those drivers being Yuki Tsunoda, and after some of his races and incidents this year, it may actually turn out that he's been driving backwards the whole time. Yep, has definitely been driving round backwards the whole time. Into Friday's action, and to start the day, it was Turn 11 causing issues, as Ricciardo and Schumacher showed why they don't yet have seats for next year, the pair of them along with Magnussen heading into the gravel but managing to make it through and carrying on. But forget those 3 drivers, as the person everyone was there to see was Max Verstappen. They didn't see him for long as the Red Bull gearbox packed up and died within the first 10 minutes of the session, and missing most of the session meant that eventually everyone set a faster lap time given Max was on the hard tyres. Everyone except Nicholas Latifi, that is. Over at Mercedes, and Lewis Hamilton was getting in the way of not 1 but 2 cars as he went daydreaming into the first turn, probably thinking back to a time when his car was actually quick. Back over at Red Bull, and with Verstappen out of the session, just Sergio Perez was representing the team, with the Mexican electing to take the opportunity to nearly stick his car into the wall. And to round out the session, we had Lando Norris practicing for Sunday's race, as he sent one up the inside of Seb Vettel because, well, I guess he just felt like it. On to FP2, and the first story came courtesy of the contract board as they determined if McLaren had bent the rules to sign Piastri or if Alpine are just useless at negotiating contracts. It was the latter, as the board ruled in McLaren's favour, and the young Australian was announced to drive alongside Lando for 2023, meaning Oscar had completed his quest to go to a slower team with whom he has no experience and a tougher teammate to go up against. Not saying it won't work out for him or that I don't agree with him jumping ship, just he has most definitely made it harder for himself to be perceived as performing well. Over at Mercedes, and it was radio issues for Hamilton as he was unable to hear any of the information the team were telling him, perhaps something Charles Leclerc should be giving a try. But as we look for more on-track action, there wasn't too much of note until Yuki Tsunoda decided to introduce himself, with the Japanese driver getting stuck after he went exploring the gravel, as apparently he heard he could find a string of consistent performances in there. Into FP3, and it was George Russell turning into a wildlife spotter as he was complaining of the birds at the Turn 7 apex. I guess it's probably nice at least to be complaining about something other than the car. In the other Mercedes, teammate Lewis Hamilton was also having trouble with small creatures at turn 7, though this time it was in the form of Yuki Tsunoda as the AlphaTauri driver went trundling along the racing line. And apparently getting in the way is something that runs in the Red Bull family, as shown by Sergio Perez, with the Mexican getting in the way of Carlos Sainz just before the very end of the session. But that wasn't the final action, as Pierre Gasly was channeling his inner Incredible Hulk, smashing through the 150-metre sign and leaving it in a worse state than Daniel Ricciardo's current career prospects. Into Q1 and the early laps had Max Verstappen at the top, followed by not the Ferraris but George Russell and then Hamilton. Meanwhile in the pit lane, Lando's mechanics clearly had their blindfolds on, releasing him directly into the path of Yuki Tsunoda and forcing the Japanese driver to slam on the brakes. But come the end of Q1, it was the other McLaren in trouble, as Ricciardo was out in 17th, with his teammate all the way up in 5th. Also out was the Aston Martin of Seb Vettel, given he went off-roading at the second to last corner. But behind him, Nicholas Latifi was in last place, with the gap between 19th and 20th being the same as the one between 19th and 1st, as the Canadian continues to demonstrate all the pace of a three-wheeled Nissan Micra. Into Q2 and Alex Albon made his way out onto the track, and then straight back in again, because some idiot, not sure that's an accurate enough wording, decided to throw a flare onto the track. But as the laps came down, it looked like the top two teams were Red Bull, obviously, but then Mercedes just in behind, as before the final runs, the Ferrari duo were sat down in 7th and 9th place, until Leclerc went 3rd and then Sainz went P1. At the other end, and Alex Albon couldn't work magic on the Williams and was out in 15th, along with Zhou, Gasly and both Alpines. Into Q3 and Verstappen set the benchmark with Hamilton just over a tenth behind, at which point Leclerc came along to take provisional pole by less than 0.06 of a second. With the Ferrari leading the way and it feeling like genuinely for the first time in Q3 this year, we had 6 cars that could all take pole. Into the final runs and Leclerc was first across the line, as he beat his previous best by 0.09 to extend his gap to Verstappen. But Max was having none of it, blitzing his lap to just sneak P1 by 21 thousandths of a second. But the Mercedes pair still had a chance to snatch pole position with drivers on fairly decent laps. That was until Sergio Perez showed why he's such a valuable second driver for Red Bull, as he performed his job perfectly, spinning at the final corner to bring out double-waved yellows and stop anyone else from setting a lap time, meaning it was Max Verstappen on pole ahead of the Ferraris with Hamilton in 4th. On to race day, and it's a pretty even start for everyone, with Hamilton attempting a move up the inside of Sainz, the Brit failing in his bid to get past but successfully not yeeting his car 50 feet into the air this time. Further back on lap 2 and Kevin Magnussen was off into the gravel, having forgot what the tarmac looked like, and while it didn't put him out of the race, it did put him behind the world's slowest Canadian in last place. He did try to get back past but sent his Haas so deep into turn 1 that it looked like he was heading off to Monza. But unfortunately elsewhere, people weren't really fancying any overtakes, with Hamilton right up behind Sainz and Russell right behind Perez, at which point both the Ferrari and the Red Bull second drivers came into the pits, and only one of them left, as Sainz was sat up on his jacks in the pit box because apparently Ferrari thought he was driving a Reliant Robin, deciding to bring out just 3 tyres instead of the usual 4 that their cars have had since well forever. And just in case Ferrari weren't screwing themselves enough, Perez got in the action and ran over their wheel gun. But in fairness, that was bound to happen, given the Zandvoort pit lane has less space than the seats on a Ryanair flight. A few laps later, back at the front, and it was time for the leaders to pit, with Verstappen now having built a 5-second gap to Leclerc behind. And this left Lewis Hamilton to take the lead with Russell in second, the Mercedes pair going for the one-stop medium to hard strategy. But on the fresher tyres after his stop, Verstappen was closing the gap to Russell, with the young Mercedes driver needing to hold up Max to improve the chance of the team winning. He held him up for all of half a corner, as Verstappen closed with the DRS and then swept by at turn 1 with the first opportunity he had, George clearly taking the replacing Valtteri role just a little too literally. But after passing one Mercedes, Verstappen was heading after the other, with the return of Max v Lewis seemingly imminent. To which Mercedes said no way, we're not doing that again, and pitted both cars with them coming out behind Perez. And on lap 35, Lewis caught Checo, with the Mexican employing the tactics he learnt from Max last year to stay ahead. Take the inside line, brake too late, and just rely on the fact that the other car will avoid a collision. But he pulled it off, and jokes aside, there was nothing wrong with that defence. But could he hold off Hamilton for another lap? No. Next time round, Hamilton was passed at the outside of turn 1 and could set off after Leclerc ahead. At which point, Sebastian Vettel came out the pits and turned into prime Nikita Mazepin. Actually, just turning himself into Nikita Mazepin is enough. To say that guy had a prime, well, it's just wrong.
It's just like wrong. This is wrong.
So when we have a
not
party,
true.
But Seb exited the pits right in front of that battle and instead of moving over, just kinda didn't. And while it didn't cost Hamilton the place to Perez, it did cost Seb a 5-second penalty for ignoring blue flags. At this point in the race, it was boiling down to 2 cars, Lewis Hamilton and the one stop pitted against Max Verstappen and his 2-stop strategy, with the Dutchman in a good position to still get the win, but what he could really use was a safety car to seal it. Oh hello there, Yuki Tsunoda pulled over at the side of the road in a tricky place to recover the car. Could this be just what Verstappen needed? Yuki with tyres supposedly not fitted handing a free pit stop to Max to maintain the lead with fresh tyres? Oh no, he's got himself going again, with the issue apparently not being related to the tyres. Instead, it turned out to be differential related, and so you'd expect him to head back into the pits to retire the car. And he did come back in and pulled up at the pit box, but then they sent him back out again, just for the car to roll around very slowly for a bit and then die 4 corners later. Now this brought out the VSC, giving Max Verstappen a free pit stop, with the AlphaTauri team seemingly playing real life Among Us and going full imposter to sabotage the Mercedes. No, I don't genuinely think there's an AlphaTauri conspiracy, just that they were probably taking tips from Ferrari on how to make a mess of things. But that did bring Max in, along with Lewis and George, given the Mercedes guys knew they wouldn't keep the lead. At which point, a couple laps later, the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas did what it always does, and died during the middle of the race. And it's now that we turn our attention to the book entitled Carlos Sainz, Everything That Can Go Wrong Will Go Wrong. As first, he overtook Ocon into turn 1 under what were most definitely double wave yellows, although the FIA's response or lack thereof would suggest that they are on a lunch break.
But I cannot see, I'm legally blind.
And then, when pitting under the ensuing safety car, was released into the path of an Alpine, giving him plus 5 seconds to add to his final race time, though I guess it's still miles quicker than his first pit stop. Back at the front and everyone was diving into the pits for a set of soft tyres. Everyone except Lewis Hamilton, as Mercedes went full Ferrari clown mode and elected not to swap to the better tyres cause YOLO I guess? With Hamilton now leading near the end of the race and Verstappen behind him on fresh softer tyres. Now where have I seen this before? Onto the restart though, and Mercedes keeping Lewis out to have track position meant absolutely all, with Max breezing by before turn 1 on what was possibly the most perfect restart ever. And the pain for Lewis wasn't yet done there, as George was going to get him too, with Russell using the DRS to close the gap and then head past down the main straight into turn 1, with the defensive jolt from Hamilton being so late you'd think it was a tackle from Granit Xhaka. And just to finish it off, Leclerc, also on the soft tyres, got past pretty easily as well, leaving the Ferrari driver in third with George Russell in second and Max Verstappen taking the win, as it seems right now the Dutchman winning is more inevitable than Thanos. Anyways, that's all for now, thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed, do make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more F1 content, but until next time, take care.